On the day I turned 21, my parents took me to an Olive Garden to announce that my grandfather had purposefully excluded me from his will because he believed I was a failure. I stared at the basket of breadsticks, totally numb. The smell of roasted garlic and cheap Parmesan cheese suddenly made me want to throw up. My dad sipped his iced tea, the ice clinking against the glass, and cleared his throat. He looked perfectly comfortable. He looked like a guy about to order a second round of appetizers, not a father delivering a crushing blow. "We didn't want to hurt your feelings when you were younger," he said smoothly. "But Pops didn't think your graphic design ambitions were a real career." My mom patted my hand. Her nails were freshly manicured. "He was traditional, honey. He wanted to reward hard work." I didn't say anything. I just looked at her hand on mine. Hard work. I had been grinding as a freelance web developer since I was 16. I spent my high school weekends pulling all-nighters to build my portfolio, hopped up on energy drinks, staring at lines of code until my eyes blurred. I paid for my own community college classes in cash. I had a perfect 5-star rating from my clients. I never asked my parents for a dime. Meanwhile, my older brother Jonah was 24. He had dropped out of 2 different universities, both out of state, both wildly expensive. He was currently finding himself, which mostly consisted of posting photos of his craft beer flights on Instagram and living in the guest house behind my parents' place. Yet Mom beamed as she mentioned Jonah's inheritance. Pops left Jonah 90 grand to help him settle down. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just pulled my hand away, stood up, and walked out of the restaurant. I drove back to my cramped studio apartment in silence. The air conditioning in my Honda was broken, and the Arizona heat baked through the windshield, but I barely felt it. I honestly believed them. For 2 whole months, I carried that rejection around. I thought the man who used to let me steer his truck when I was 10 had actually looked at my life and decided I was worthless. Then came the morning I needed to register my new LLC. I went down to the Maricopa County Courthouse. It was a Tuesday, early. The place smelled like floor wax and old paper. The clerk told me it would be a 20-minute wait, so I wandered over to the public terminals in the corner of the lobby. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was a masochistic urge. Maybe I just wanted to see the official document where my grandfather wrote me off. I typed in his name and pulled up the probate records from 2018. My heart stopped. I stared at the glowing green text on the monitor. There was no disinheritance clause. There was no rant about my career choices. Instead, there was a specific disbursement of $115,400 to a custodial trust in my name. Pops hadn't written me out. He had split the estate perfectly in half. I sat there for 5 minutes, unblinking. I felt the blood draining from my face. I walked up to the clerk's window. My voice didn't even shake. I requested the full ledger for the trust account and paid $12 for the printed copies. The clerk handed me a stack of warm paper. I took it out to my car in the courthouse parking lot, turned on the engine just to get some air moving, and started reading. The paper trail was sickening. It was all right there, itemized and stamped by the bank. In October 2019, $45,000 vanished from the trust in a single wire transfer. That was the exact same month my dad came pulling into the driveway in his prized, fully restored 1969 Mustang Mach 1. I remembered him revving the engine, telling the neighbors he'd finally dipped into his rainy day fund to treat himself. I flipped the page. In April 2021, $32,000 disappeared. Mom's week-long luxury spa retreat to Switzerland with her tennis club. She had bragged about the private helicopters and the mineral baths for months. By February 2023, they drained another $35,000. That one made me physically sick. It was a direct cashier's check to a resort in Cabo San Lucas, Jonah's lavish destination wedding. I remembered the wedding clearly. I wasn't allowed to be a groomsman because Mom said my only dark suit wasn't tailored enough and would look sloppy in the photos. I sat in the 4th row while Jonah and his groomsmen drank $1,000 tequila, paid for with my money. I looked at the final page. The remaining balance of the $115,400 my grandfather had left me to start my life. It was $46. The ledger showed the last few $100 being whittled down on automatic withdrawals for premium dog food and Amazon Prime subscriptions. I didn't scream. I didn't call them and demand answers. A cold, heavy calm washed over me. I put the car in gear and drove to a local print shop. I asked the guy behind the counter for their best paper stock. I made 20 high-quality, full-color copies of the probate ledger, highlighting the specific withdrawals that matched the Mustang, the spa, and the wedding. I had them bound in glossy red covers. They looked like professional financial portfolios. I put them in a cardboard box, drove home, and shoved the box under my bed. I bided my time. The perfect moment arrived 3 weeks later. My parents were hosting their extravagant silver anniversary vow renewal at the local country club. It was exactly the kind of event they loved. About 60 relatives and friends were there, sipping champagne on the terrace overlooking the golf course. String quartet playing in the corner. Floral arrangements that probably cost more than my rent. I arrived wearing the same untailored suit from Jonah's wedding. I carried a sleek black messenger bag over my shoulder. Everyone was smiling. Dad was working the room, clapping guys on the back. Mom was floating around in a custom silver gown, accepting compliments. Eventually, the waiters started pouring the good champagne, and Uncle Gerald clinked his glass with a silver spoon to give a toast. He stood at the front of the terrace, his face flushed with expensive wine. To my brother and his beautiful wife, Gerald proclaimed, his voice booming over the crowd. They've sacrificed everything to give their boys a head start in this world. They are the definition of selfless parents. The crowd murmured in agreement, glasses raised. I walked right up to the microphone. I didn't ask for permission. I just took the stand from Gerald's hand. Actually, Gerald, they gave Jonah a head start, I said into the mic. My voice echoed across the terrace. They bought themselves a Mustang and a Swiss vacation with mine. The entire terrace fell dead silent. You could hear the wind rustling the canvas umbrellas. What is he talking about? Aunt Pauline whispered loudly from the front table. I looked at my mother. The fake tan seemed to drain right out of her face. She looked like a ghost. My dad's eyes went wide and then narrowed into sheer panic. He lunged toward the microphone, grabbing my forearm, hissing under his breath, "Shut your mouth right now. Have you lost your mind?" I yanked my arm away, sidestepped him, and unzipped my messenger bag. I pulled out the glossy red folders. "Grandpa left me $115,000, I said, projecting my voice over the crowd. "Here are the court records showing how my loving parents embezzled every single penny." I started tossing the red folders onto the surrounding tables. They landed with heavy smacks next to the crystal centerpieces. Chaos erupted immediately. Relatives grabbed the folders and ripped them open. My dad's business partner, Arlo, opened one to the middle page and literally gasped. Aunt Pauline stared at the Cabo wedding receipts, her jaw unhinged. She looked over at Jonah, who was sitting at the head table, suddenly shrinking into his chair. "This is a lie," Dad stammered. stepping back toward the mic. The money it was legally meant for family expenses. We were custodians. Uncle Gerald threw his folder down on the linen tablecloth. He didn't use the microphone. He just yelled, "You stole a dead man's gift," to his grandson. "You spent it on a damn car." The vow renewal imploded. The string quartet packed up their instruments in a panic. The photographer awkwardly slung his heavy cameras over his shoulder and slipped out the side door. Half the guest list, including Arlo and Aunt Pauline, stood up and walked out toward the valet before the entrees were even served. Mom collapsed into a chair, crying hysterically, trying to grab people's hands as they walked past her. No one stopped. I didn't stick around to watch the rest of the fire burn. I walked out the front doors, got in my Honda, and drove away. The next morning, I blocked every single family member in my phone. I packed up my studio apartment, broke my lease, and moved my business to Denver. I wanted mountains. I wanted cold air. I wanted to be as far away from the desert and them as possible. I set up a new life, rented a desk at a sleek co-working space downtown, got some new, high-paying clients. I didn't hear a word from my family for 6 months. No apologies, no texts from burner numbers, nothing. The silence was exactly what I wanted. Until yesterday, I was at the co-working space, drinking a bad cup of drip coffee, when the receptionist Sable tapped on my glass partition. She slid a certified letter onto my desk. It had a return address from a law firm in Phoenix. I sliced it open. It wasn't an apology. It was a frantic, desperate legal demand. They were being audited by the ears, because they had never reported the stolen trust money as income, and because my little stunt at the country club had apparently tipped off someone who tipped off the IRS, they were now facing catastrophic penalties. We weren't talking about a slap on the wrist. We were talking about massive fines, back taxes, and potential federal tax evasion charges. The letter was drafted by some lawyer named Thad Beckett, but the cover note was handwritten by my dad. The handwriting was a jagged, terrified scrawl. He begged me to sign the attached retroactive waiver. The legal document classified the $115,400 as a voluntary gift from me to them, essentially wiping away the embezzlement and making it a non-taxable event for them. If I signed it, Dad's note promised they would eventually pay me back in monthly installments. I read the letter 3 times. I laughed out loud in the middle of the quiet office. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. I crumpled the handwritten note, threw it in the trash, and slid the legal waiver into my bag to use as scrap paper later. I was going to let them burn. I went back to coding. I thought that was the end of it. 2 hours later, my cell phone rang. It was an unrecognized Colorado number. I figured it was a local client, so I picked it up. "Don't hang up." It was Jonah. His voice was tight, breathless, like he was pacing. "How did you get this number?" I asked, my hand freezing on my mouse. "Dad gave it to me." Jonah snapped. "Listen to me. You have to sign that paper." "I don't have to do anything, Jonah. Lose my number. If you don't sign it, I'm screwed too," he yelled. I pulled the phone away from my ear as his voice cracked. The ears is looking at the wedding money. They're classifying it as unreported income on my end because the checks were cut directly to my vendors. I can't pay the penalties on 35 grand. I don't have it. Then sell some of your craft beer collection. I'm hanging up. "Wait," he screamed. "If you don't sign that waiver by Friday, I'm not going down alone. Dad's lawyer found a loophole in your LLC filing when you were operating in Arizona. You used the home address for a commercial entity without the proper zoning permits, and I have the emails proving you did client work on Mom's secure company servers when your laptop broke 3 years ago." I gripped the edge of my desk. "What are you talking about?" "Thad Beckett says it's enough to file a civil suit for corporate theft and breach of data," Jonah said, his voice dropping into a nasty, desperate sneer. "We will drag your new company through the dirt. We will tie you up in Phoenix courts for years. You won't be able to take a single client in Denver without them seeing a pending lawsuit for corporate theft attached to your name." He paused, letting the silence hang heavy over the line. "Sign the waiver," Jonah said, "or we take your business down with us." I hung up. I didn't yell back. I didn't tell him to go to hell. I just tapped the red button on the screen, placed the phone face down on the laminate desk, and exhaled a long, shaky breath. The co-working space was humming with the low murmur of startup pitches and the clatter of mechanical keyboards, but all I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. I stared at the blank wall of my cubicle partition. Corporate theft. Breach of data. It was laughable. When my laptop had a fried motherboard 3 years ago, Mom had offered to let me use her real estate agency's backup server to host a few client sites temporarily. I had set up the firewalls myself. As for the LLC address, half the freelancers in Arizona used their residential address before renting office space. It was a minor zoning infraction at absolute worst, usually resolved with a $50 fee to the city. But Thad Beckett wasn't trying to win a case. He was trying to create a paper trail of radioactive waste. Jonah was right about one thing. If I was bidding on a $50,000 web infrastructure contract in Denver, and the client's compliance department ran a standard background check, an active, pending lawsuit for corporate data theft would instantly disqualify me. Companies don't care if a lawsuit is frivolous. They care about liability. My family was trying to starve me out. They wanted to hold my future hostage to pay for their past. I didn't go back to coding. I opened a new browser tab and searched for corporate defense attorneys in downtown Denver. I spent an hour reading bios and reviews before I found a firm that specialized in frivolous litigation and corporate disputes. I called their office, explained that I was facing an extortion attempt dressed up as a civil suit, and paid an exorbitant rush fee to secure a consultation for 3 o'clock that same afternoon. The law office was 6 blocks away, located on the 14th floor of a sleek glass building. The lawyer I met with was named Caden Farrow. He was in his late 30s, wearing a sharp navy suit with no tie, and he had the kind of calm, unbothered energy that immediately made my heart rate drop. I sat in his leather guest chair and handed him the certified letter, my dad's handwritten note, and a printed timeline of the trust fund embezzlement. Caden read through the documents in complete silence. He didn't make faces. He just used a silver pen to tap lightly against the desk as he read. After about 10 minutes, he set the papers down and looked at me. "Your family is playing a very stupid, very dangerous game," Caden said, his voice level. "This lawyer Beckett, I looked him up while you were in the waiting room. He's a bottom feeder in Phoenix. He handles messy divorces and small business partnership disputes. He's not a tax attorney, which is why he's trying this particular angle." "Can they actually sue me?" I asked, leaning forward. "Can they tie up my business?" "In civil court, anybody can sue anybody for anything," Caden replied, leaning back in his chair. "They can file the paperwork. It will cost you money to file a motion to dismiss, and it might take a few months to get a judge to look at it and throw it out. But that's not the real issue here." He tapped the legal waiver they wanted me to sign. "This document," Caden said, his tone hardening, "is a trap. Not just a civil trap, but a criminal one. Your parents didn't report that 115 grand as income. The ears is auditing them, likely tracing the cash flow from the trust to the Mustang, the spa, the wedding vendors. The ears wants their cut, plus massive penalties for evasion. Caden pushed the waiver across the desk toward me. If you sign this paper stating it was a voluntary gift, you are legally swearing to the federal government that you took possession of the trust and then gifted the funds to them, which means you would be on the hook for the gift tax filings. More importantly, because we can prove via the probate ledger that you never actually touched the money. Signing this document to help them avoid an heirs penalty is conspiracy to commit tax fraud. You sign this, you catch a federal charge to save the people who stole from you. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. I hadn't even thought about the federal implications. I just thought it was a scummy contract. They were literally trying to make me an accessory to their tax evasion. So what do I do? I asked, my voice barely a rasp. You do nothing, Caden said simply. You do not sign it. You do not text them. You do not call your brother back. Let them file their garbage lawsuit. If they do, I will file a countersuit for legal fees and malicious prosecutions so fast it'll make Thad Beckett's head spin. Furthermore, I can draft a letter to the IRS auditor currently handling your parents' case, providing them with this exact waiver as proof of an ongoing cover-up. He smiled, but it was a shark's smile. We can turn the heat up so high your parents will be begging for a plea deal. I paid his retainer fee on the spot. It took a massive chunk out of my savings, but walking out of that office, I felt a kind of armored protection I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't the 21-year-old kid crying in his broken-down Honda anymore. I had legal counsel. I had a wall between me and them. I walked back to my co-working space, the crisp Denver air clearing my head. I grabbed a fresh coffee from the break room and sat back down at my desk, ready to finally get some work done. I woke my computer screen. There were 3 new emails in my inbox. 2 were automated server reports. The third was from Imogen Locke. Imogen was the senior project manager at a mid-sized logistics company here in Colorado. They were my anchor client. I handled their entire back-end database architecture, and their monthly retainer accounted for nearly 40% of my income. We had a great working relationship. She was usually informal, using lots of emojis and exclamation points. The subject line of this email was just my name, no emojis. I clicked it open. We need to talk immediately. Our legal compliance department just received a voicemail from an attorney named Thad Beckett, representing an Arizona-based real estate firm. He claims there is an active, pending litigation regarding the theft of proprietary code and data breaches associated with your LLC. He heavily implied that the back-end architecture you are building for us contains stolen proprietary assets. I am so sorry, but compliance has ordered me to suspend your server access and freeze our current contract until this is formally cleared up. Please call me as soon as you get this. I stared at the screen. The text started to blur. They didn't wait until Friday. Jonah's threat wasn't a warning about what they might do. It was a distraction. While I was sitting in Caden's office paying a retainer to defend myself against a lawsuit, Thad Beckett was already calling my clients, poisoning the well. They had dug into my public portfolio, found the companies I listed as current clients, and systematically targeted my income. My phone buzzed on the desk. A text message from an unknown Arizona number. Check your email. We can make the calls stop today. Just sign the paper. Jonah, I didn't reply. I took a screenshot of Jonah's text, opened my email, attached the screenshot along with Imogen's message, and forwarded the whole thing to Caden Farrow. Subject line, they didn't wait. I didn't even have to call him. My phone rang less than 2 minutes later. I told you Thad Beckett was a bottom feeder, Caden said by way of greeting. He didn't sound panicked. He sounded professionally offended. This is tortious interference with a business contract. It's no longer just a threat of a frivolous lawsuit. It's active financial sabotage. Imogen suspended my contract, I said, my voice tight. That's 40% of my monthly revenue, Caden, and I'm guessing Beckett didn't stop with her. I have 6 other active clients on my roster. If he goes down the list, he's banking on you panicking, Caden interrupted. He's applying maximum pressure outside the legal system because he knows his actual case is garbage. They want you to sign that waiver today before you realize how much leverage you actually have. I don't feel like I have leverage. I feel like I'm watching my business burn down. You have the matches. They just don't know it yet, Caden said smoothly. Here's what happens next. You are going to draft a very brief, very polite email to your client, Imogen. You will state that this is an extortion attempt by estranged family members regarding a stolen inheritance, that no proprietary data is involved, and that your legal counsel is handling it. You will CC me. I will reply all, attaching a cease and desist that I am currently drafting to send to Beckett. Will that get my contract unfrozen? Probably not today, Caden admitted, giving it to me straight. Corporate compliance departments move like molasses, but it will stop the bleeding and show them you aren't hiding anything. Meanwhile, I am filing a formal complaint against Beckett with the Arizona State Bar for unethical conduct, and I am sending a copy of that waiver directly to the ears agent handling your parents' audit. I swallowed hard. You're pulling the trigger on the ears? They went after your livelihood. We are dropping a nuke on theirs, Caden said. Do not answer any calls from unknown numbers. Do not check your texts. Let me do my job. He hung up. I sat in my cubicle, the noise of the co-working space fading into a dull roar. I drafted the email to Imogen exactly as Caden instructed. I hit send. Then I pulled up my master client list and started checking my other accounts. 10 minutes later, another email dropped into my inbox. This one was from Jasper, the owner of a chain of local artisan bakeries whose inventory system I managed. Hey man, got a really weird voicemail from some lawyer in Phoenix asking about our data security with your LLC. Sounds like spam, but I wanted to flag it for you. Give me a call later. Jasper was a small business guy, not a corporate compliance drone, so he hadn't panicked and pulled the plug, but the poison was definitely spreading. I called him immediately, gave him the same brief explanation I gave Imogen, and apologized for the drama. He laughed it off, told me family was a nightmare, and said my job was safe. But the knot in my stomach didn't loosen. Beckett was systematic. He had scraped my website, found my portfolio, and cold-called everyone. I spent the rest of the afternoon doing damage control. Out of my 7 clients, 3 paused my contracts pending legal review. 2 ignored the voicemails entirely. Imogen's company locked me out of their servers completely. By 5 o'clock, my projected monthly income had been slashed by more than half. I opened my banking app. After Caden's retainer and my rent for the month, my cash reserves were dangerously thin. If this dragged on for 3 months, I would be completely broke. That was their plan. Starve me out. Make the pain of the audit and the wedding debt my problem by making my life impossible. I packed up my laptop and walked out of the co-working space into the cooling Denver evening. The sky was bruised purple over the the mountains. I drove back to my apartment, a modest one-bedroom on the outskirts of the city. I didn't turn on the lights when I walked in. I just dropped my bag on the counter and grabbed a glass of water. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Caden had told me not to look. I pulled it out anyway. It wasn't a text from Jonah. It was an email to my personal Gmail account. The sender was an address I hadn't seen in years. Desert Rose Realty at my mother. I stared at the screen in the dark kitchen. I hadn't spoken to her since the country club. I hadn't heard her voice since she was sobbing in her silver gown. I opened the email. There was no legal jargon. There were no threats about lawsuits or corporate data. It was just a wall of text, perfectly formatted, hitting every single emotional pressure point she had installed in me since childhood. Honey, please, I know you're angry. I know we made mistakes. Your father and I were trying to protect the family, trying to keep everything fair between you and Jonah. We never meant to hurt you, and we definitely didn't think you would try to destroy us like this. The ears agent was here today. They went through the house. They are talking about putting a lien on Desert Rose Realty. If they do that, I lose the business. I lose everything I've built. Jonah is having panic attacks because he can't afford his rent, let alone a federal penalty. You made your point at the vow renewal. You embarrassed us in front of everyone we know. Aunt Pauline won't even speak to me. Hasn't that been enough revenge? Please, call Thad. Sign the paper. We can fix this quietly. We are still your family. Don't let them take our home over a misunderstanding. Love, Mom. I read it twice. A misunderstanding. $115,000 spent on a vintage muscle car, a Swiss vacation, and a luxury wedding while I ate ramen and paid for community college in cash. And she was calling it a misunderstanding. I didn't forward this one to Caden. I just deleted it. I went into the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and tried to wash the exhaustion away. I needed to sleep. I needed to wake up tomorrow and start hustling for new clients to replace the ones Beckett had spooked. I couldn't afford to be dragged into their emotional quicksand. I finally went to bed around midnight. I tossed and turned, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. At 3:14 a.m., my phone violently vibrated against the nightstand. I jolted awake, my heart hammering against my ribs. I grabbed the phone, squinting against the harsh glare of the screen. It was an automated alert from my bank. Fraud alert. Suspicious activity detected on your Visa ending in 4092. A charge of $4,500 sent to Beckett & Associates Legal has been flagged. I sat straight up in bed, the sheets tangling around my legs. They hadn't just tried to hack my business. They had my old banking information. Dad had helped me set up my first checking account when I was 16. He was a joint account holder back then. I had transferred all the money to a new business account when I started my LLC, but the old personal account was still open, still linked to my credit profile. I tapped the alert, my fingers shaking. Dad hadn't just used his old access. He had used my name, my social security number, and the dormant joint account to authorize a payment directly to Thad Beckett's firm. They were trying to use my own credit to pay the lawyer who was currently destroying my life. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the alert. A cold, heavy weight settled in my stomach. I didn't hesitate. I tapped the red button that said report as fraud. The app immediately locked the screen, prompting me to call the 24-hour customer service line. I dialed the number, sitting in the dark, shivering in my boxers. The hold music was some upbeat acoustic guitar track that sounded psychotic at 3 in the morning. When a representative finally picked up, I kept my voice deadpan and professional. I explained that I had not authorized the $4,500 charge to Beckett & Associates. I explained that a former joint account holder, whose access should have been revoked years ago, had fraudulently used my active credit profile. I can see the charge is currently pending, the representative said, her keyboard clacking in the background. I'm canceling the card ending in 4092, freezing the associated checking account, and issuing a provisional credit for the charge while the fraud department investigates. Will you be filing a police report, sir? Yes, I said. First thing in the morning. I hung up. I didn't go back to sleep. I couldn't. I sat on the edge of the bed and watched the digital clock on the microwave in the kitchen flip from 3:45 to 4 Gullo, then to 5 Gullo. My dad had crossed a line that you can't uncross. Extortion through a sleazy lawyer was one thing. Using my identity to steal money from me to pay the sleazy lawyer was a felony. It was desperate, stupid, and incredibly short-sighted. It meant the ears audit was bleeding them dry faster than I thought, and they didn't have the liquid cash to keep Thad Beckett on retainer. At exactly 7:30 a.m., I took a screenshot of the canceled charge, attached the fraud case number, and emailed it to Caden Farrow. My phone rang at 7:42. Tell me this is real, Caden said. He didn't even say hello. He sounded wide awake and practically vibrating with energy. It's real, I said, putting him on speaker while I poured stale coffee into a mug. My dad used an old joint checking account that's still tethered to my main credit line. He tried to run $4.5 grand directly to Beckett's firm. Caden let out a sharp, genuine laugh. Your father is an idiot. He just handed us the hammer, the nails, and the coffin. What does it mean for us? It means Thad Beckett is done, Caden said, his tone turning razor sharp. Beckett is dirty, but he's a lawyer. He relies on his license to make a living. If I call him this morning and tell him his retainer was paid with a stolen credit card and that we have the bank fraud case number to prove it, he has two choices. He can drop your family as clients immediately and retract all his claims to your corporate clients, or I forward the fraud report to the state bar and the local police, implicating him in receiving stolen funds. Lawyers do not go to jail for their clients. He will drop them before lunchtime. Do it, I said. I'm drafting the email right now. I'm CCing him, his senior partner, and his billing department. Go to your co-working space. Act normal. Try to get some work done. I'll call you when the bomb goes off. I got dressed, grabbed my laptop, and drove downtown. The morning traffic was crawling, and the mountains were hidden behind a thick layer of gray smog. I felt hollowed out, running on 3 hours of sleep and adrenaline. When I got to my desk, I didn't try to code. I couldn't focus on syntax or database logic. Instead, I opened my personal email. There were no new messages from my mom, but there was a direct message on LinkedIn, sent at 6:15 a.m. It was from Arlo, my dad's business partner. Arlo had been at the vow renewal. He was the one who had gasped when he read the ledger. He and my dad had co-owned a commercial supply company in Phoenix for 15 years. Arlo was the money guy, the one who kept the books, while my dad was the salesman who schmoozed the clients. The message was short. I need to talk to you. Not about your dad, about my company. Call me on this number. Do not tell your parents. I stared at the 10-digit number. I didn't owe Arlo anything, but he had walked out of the country club that day right behind Uncle Gerald. He hadn't stayed to comfort my parents. Curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed my phone, walked out of the open plan office into one of the soundproof phone booths, and dialed. Arlo picked up on the first ring. Did you sign the waiver? Hello to you too, Arlo, I said, leaning against the glass door of the booth. No, I didn't sign the waiver. He exhaled loudly into the receiver. It sounded like he was in a car, the low rumble of highway tires in the background. Good, don't. I wasn't planning on it. Why are you calling me? Because your father is trying to pull my company down with him, Arlo said, his voice tight with suppressed rage. The IRS isn't just looking at his personal accounts anymore. Because he's a 50% stakeholder in our LLC, the audit has bled over into our business accounts. The feds are crawling up my ass, asking for 5 years of P&L statements, looking for hidden assets. I'm sorry, Arlo, but that's not my problem. It is your problem. Because of what he's trying to do right now, Arlo snapped. He came to me yesterday afternoon. He is in full panic mode. He knows he owes the ears for the trust money, plus penalties. It's going to be north of 50 grand payable immediately to avoid criminal charges. He doesn't have it. His credit is maxed out, and your mom's real estate agency is heavily leveraged. I didn't say anything. I just listened to the highway noise. He asked me to authorize an emergency owner's draw from the business. Arlo continued. $60,000. He wants to drain our operating capital to pay off the IRS. Did you let him? Hell no. If we drain the operating capital, we can't make payroll next week. I told him to kick rocks. But here's the thing. He has signing authority on the main account. He doesn't technically need my permission to write the check. He just asked because he wanted my blessing. When I told him no, he got this look in his eye. A desperate, cornered animal look. Arlo paused, taking a breath. I'm locking down the business accounts today, but I need leverage to force him to sell his half of the company to me for pennies on the dollar before the ears puts a lien on it. I want him out, completely. And what does that have to do with me? I know about the lawyer Thad Beckett, Arlo said. I know he's going after your clients. Your dad bragged about it in the office yesterday, saying he was going to squeeze you until you signed the gift waiver. I also know he tried to use your old credit card last night to pay Beckett's retainer because he used his work computer to do it, and I monitor the network logs. My grip on the phone tightened. You have proof he committed wire fraud on a company device? I have the IP logs, the timestamps, and the screen capture. Arlo said smoothly. I have the bullet that puts him in federal prison for identity theft. Send it to me. I will, but I want to trade, Arlo said. The salesman in him was finally coming out. I'll give you the network logs. You give them to your lawyer. You destroy Beckett. You get your clients back. In exchange, I need you to forward me the official ears audit notice he sent you with that waiver. The one that proves he's under investigation for tax fraud regarding an embezzled family trust. Why do you need that? I asked. Because our partnership agreement has a morality clause, Arlo said, his voice turning cold. If one partner is found to be engaged in fraud, embezzlement, or criminal tax evasion, the other partner can trigger a hostile buyout at 20% of market value. If I have that official ears document and the probate ledger you handed out at the wedding, I can force him out of the company today. I take his business, he takes the debt. I looked out through the glass of the phone booth. Sable, the receptionist, was watering a large Monstera plant near the front desk. A guy in a Patagonia vest was laughing at the coffee machine. It was a perfectly normal Wednesday morning for everyone else. Meanwhile, Arlo was asking me to hand him the knife to cut my father's throat. If you trigger that buyout, I said slowly, he loses his income. He loses the company. He won't be able to pay the ears. That's his problem, Arlo said. He stole from his own kid to buy a Mustang. You really care if he goes bankrupt? No, I said. I don't. So do we have a deal? Send me the logs first, I said. When my lawyer confirms they're usable, I'll send you the heirs paperwork and the ledger. Done, Arlo said. He hung up. 2 minutes later, an encrypted zip file landed in my inbox. I forwarded it directly to Caden Farrow without opening it. From Dad's business partner, I typed in the body of the email. Proof he used a company network to run the fraudulent charge to Beckett. Use it. I walked out of the phone booth and back to my desk. I felt a strange, terrifying sense of calm. The chessboard was flipping. They had tried to starve me out, but they had left themselves completely exposed. My phone buzzed. It was Imogen Locke. My stomach dropped. I hadn't expected to hear from her until the legal mess was entirely cleared up. I took a deep breath and answered. Hi, Imogen. Hey, she said. She didn't sound angry, just exhausted. Listen, I got the email from your lawyer this morning. The cease and desist he attached was aggressive. It needed to be. Beckett is lying to you. I believe you, Imogen said softly. I really do. Your work for us has always been spotless, but my hands are tied by compliance. They ran a deeper background check on you this morning after Beckett's call. I frowned. There's nothing on my background check. I have a clean record. Not criminal, Imogen said. Financial, they pulled a comprehensive credit and liability report on your LLC. And there's a $75,000 mechanics lien filed against your business name in Maricopa County, Arizona, Imogen said. Filed yesterday afternoon. I stopped breathing. A what? A mechanics lien for unpaid contracting work, she said. The filer is a company called Desert Rose Realty, my mother's company. They filed a commercial lien against my business, I said, my voice rising in disbelief. I've never done a day of contracting work for her real estate agency in my life. She doesn't even employ contractors. She sells houses. I know it's probably fraudulent, Imogen said, her tone sympathetic but firm. But a registered commercial lien of that size flags our vendor compliance system automatically. We can't do business with an entity that has active, unresolved liens over $50,000. It's a hard-coded corporate policy to prevent us from getting dragged into vendor bankruptcy disputes. I slumped into my chair, pressing the heel of my hand against my eyes. Imogen, please, give me 48 hours. My lawyer is currently disbarring the attorney who filed this garbage. It's going to vanish. I can give you until Friday, Imogen said quietly. If the lien isn't cleared from the public registry by close of business Friday, my department head is forcing me to terminate your contract permanently and migrate the database to an in-house team. I'm so sorry. I'll talk to you then. The line went dead. I set the phone down. I stared at the blank screen of my monitor. My dad had tried the brute force method, stealing my credit card to pay the lawyer. But this was my mother, the woman who had emailed me 12 hours ago, begging for peace, crying about her home and her business. She had turned around and weaponized her own real estate agency to file a fraudulent commercial lien against my LLC, knowing it would instantly trigger red flags in every corporate compliance software on the market. She wasn't just defending herself from the ears. She was actively trying to destroy my livelihood to force my hand. I picked up my phone and called Caden Farrow. I got the network logs from the business partner. Caden answered immediately. They're beautiful. We have Beckett dead to rights. Forget Beckett for a second, I said, my voice shaking with a rage I hadn't felt since the day at the Olive Garden. Check the Maricopa County Public Registry. Look up my LLC. I heard him typing. A few seconds passed. Son of a bitch, Caden muttered. Desert Rose Imogen's Realty, I said. My mother's company. She filed a fraudulent $75,000 lien against me yesterday. Imogen's company just flagged it. They're terminating my contract on Friday if it's not gone. Caden was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, the professional amusement was gone from his voice. He sounded dangerously serious. Filing a false commercial lien is perjury, Caden said. It's a deliberate abuse of the commercial code. She had to swear under penalty of perjury that you owed her company that money. Can you remove it? I can file an emergency motion to expunge, but courts are slow. Getting a judge to look at it by Friday is a coin toss, even with an expedited filing fee. So I lose my biggest client because my mother lied on a form. No, Caden said flatly. I am going to call Thad Beckett right now. I am going to tell him about the credit card fraud, the IP logs from Arlo, and the fraudulent lien his client just committed perjury to file. I am going to give him exactly 1 hour to voluntarily withdraw the lien and send a formal retraction letter to all of your clients. And if he doesn't, then I am sending the ears, the Arizona State Bar, and the Phoenix Police Department everything we have. But he will. Beckett is a rat. When the ship sinks, rats swim. Make the call, I said. I'm on it. Don't answer anything from them. Caden hung up. I sat at my desk watching the clock on my computer screen tick forward. It was 9:15 a.m. I waited. The minutes dragged like hours. I opened up the code for Jasper's bakery inventory system, trying to force myself to review a string of variables, but the letters just swam on the screen. At 9:48 a.m., my cell phone rang. It wasn't Caden. It wasn't an unknown Arizona number. It was Jonah. I stared at his name on the screen. I had blocked him yesterday. He must have borrowed a phone or used a spoofing app. I remembered Caden's order not to answer. I watched it ring 3 times, 4 times, then it stopped. A second later, a text message came through from the same spoofed number. Mom just collapsed in the kitchen. The paramedics are here. Dad says it's a heart attack. He says it's your fault because of the lawyer calling. Pick up the goddamn phone. I stared at the screen. The glowing text blurred for a second. Your fault. The old guilt, the deep conditioning they had drilled into me since childhood, flared up like a phantom pain in a severed limb. My thumb hovered over the green call button. I could hear Jonah's voice in my head. I could picture the flashing lights in the driveway, the paramedics in the kitchen with the expensive granite countertops, my dad yelling at someone. I almost called. I almost threw away my entire defense, my business, and my sanity just to ask if she was breathing. But then I looked at the timestamp, 9:48 a.m., exactly 12 minutes before Caden's 1-hour deadline for Beckett was set to expire. The timing wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a random tragedy. Caden had called Beckett. Beckett, facing disbarment and criminal accessory charges over the stolen credit card, had immediately called his clients. He had told my mother that he was dropping them, and he had told her exactly why. Because she had committed felony perjury by filing a fraudulent commercial lien, and we had the proof to bury her. She wasn't having a heart attack. She was having a panic attack because the consequences of her own actions had finally kicked the door down, and there was no one left to write a check to make it go away. She had collapsed because she realized she was going to lose her real estate license, her business, and possibly her freedom. And their first instinct, even then, was to use it as a weapon. Send Jonah to play the victim. Blame me. Make me drop the legal pressure so she wouldn't have to face the music. I didn't reply. I didn't block the spoofed number. I just took a screenshot of the message, emailed it to Caden with the subject line extinction burst, and powered my cell phone off completely. I opened my desk drawer, dropped the black rectangle inside, and slid it shut. I turned back to my monitor and started typing code. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to work through the database architecture for Jasper's bakery. I worked for an hour. Then 2. I didn't check my email. I didn't look at the drawer. At 1:15 p.m., my desk phone rang. It was the internal line routed through Sable at the front desk. Hey, Sable said. Your lawyer is on line 1. Put him through, I said. A click, and then Caden's voice came through the speaker. He sounded incredibly satisfied. The rat swam, Caden said. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since October of 2019. He withdrew the lien? He didn't just withdraw it. He practically broke the land speed record filing the expungement with Maricopa County, Caden said, the grin audible in his voice. He sent a signed notarized letter of retraction to Imogen's compliance department and CC'd me. He explicitly stated that the lien was filed in error due to client misrepresentation and that neither you nor your LLC have any outstanding debts or data breaches. He also formally dropped your parents as clients as of 10:00 a.m. Mountain Time. And the credit card fraud? I asked. I gave him the confirmation number for the cancellation and the police report draft, Caden said. He voided the transaction on his end immediately. Claimed his billing department ran it by mistake without verifying the cardholder name. It's a lie, but it covers his ass. More importantly, it leaves your parents twisting in the wind, with 0 legal representation, an active ears audit, and a trail of documented fraud. I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at the Denver skyline. Jonah texted me from a fake number this morning. Said mom had a heart attack because of my lawyer. Said it was my fault. Caden scoffed. She had a panic attack when Beckett told her she was looking at 2 to 4 years for perjury if she didn't withdraw that lien immediately. Don't let them rent space in your head. You won. Is it over? I asked quietly. For you? Yes. For them, it's just starting. I forwarded the complete file, including the retraction letter where Beckett admits his client lied, directly to the IRS auditor handling their case. I also sent a copy to Arlo. Thank you, Caden. You paid my retainer, kid. I just did the job. Go get your client back. I hung up. I pulled my cell phone out of the drawer and turned it back on. It immediately pinged with a missed call from Imogen. I dialed her back. I got the letter, Imogen said as soon as she answered. She sounded relieved. Compliance just cleared it. The hold on your server access has been lifted, and your contract is fully reinstated. I'm sorry we had to put you through that ringer, but corporate policy is inflexible. I understand, Imogen, really. Thank you for giving me the window to fix it. See you in the weekly stand-up tomorrow, she said, and hung up. I spent the rest of the afternoon calling the other clients who had paused their contracts. I forwarded them Beckett's retraction letter. By 5 o'clock, every single account was unfrozen. My business was entirely intact. The firewall I had built around my life had held. I packed up my bag and walked out of the co-working space. The evening air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine from the mountains. I didn't feel euphoric. I didn't feel the urge to celebrate. I just felt incredibly, wonderfully light. 2 weeks passed. I settled back into my routine. The money started flowing back into my accounts. I picked up a new client, a tech startup out of Boulder, and moved to a better apartment with a balcony facing the foothills. I never unblocked Jonah. I never heard from my parents. But I did get one final message from Arizona. It was an email from Arlo, sent on a Friday evening while I was sitting on my new balcony with a cold beer. Just thought you should know. The email read, I triggered the morality clause in the partnership agreement. The ears audit notice and the ledger you sent were bulletproof. Your dad tried to fight it, but he couldn't afford a lawyer since Beckett dumped him. I bought his 50% equity for 20 cents on the dollar. He's completely out of the company. From what I hear, the ears put a federal tax lien on Desert Rose Realty to cover the missing trust money and the evasion penalties. They listed the house in Phoenix yesterday. Good luck in Denver. I read the email once. I didn't reply. I just highlighted it, hit the trash icon, and emptied my deleted folder. I set my phone face down on the small metal table. The sun was setting over the Rockies, painting the sky in deep streaks of violet and gold. The air was getting cold, but I didn't go inside. I just sat there, listening to the distant hum of traffic on the interstate, feeling the solid, quiet reality of the life I had built with my own 2 hands. The $115,000 was gone, spent on a car and a spa and a party I wasn't allowed to stand in. But they had paid for it. They had bought their own ruin, and they had handed me the receipt. I picked up my beer, took a long drink, and watched the last sliver of the sun disappear behind the mountains. Tomorrow was Saturday. I had a hike planned early in the morning, and for the first time in my life, I had absolutely nothing tying me to the desert.